and get your hair cut way up high. Get yourself a lawyer, son. You're gonna need a real good one.
David Whiting is back with you, dispensing some free legal advice on this sunny, albeit rather hot day. 1300 222 774. David, good morning.
Good morning, Virginia.
What's happening in your world? Any news about that we should know about?
No. Life is quiet and keeps going. I haven't looked. I think the formal start of the legal year will be next week, so there'll be church services, and the lawyers generally have a breakfast in Hardware Lane. So that's the formal start of the legal year. No great cases coming up?
No big cases that we know of. And we were talking about hospital waiting lists. What are the waiting lists like in the courts?
Well, we know that the delay in VCAT is something like 2 years for a contested hearing, depending on the lists. I was involved in a guardianship application that was lodged in November and flagged as urgent and heard Friday. So the answer would be there are delays left, right and centre. I think some of the magistrates' courts lists have doubled in terms of unresolved matters. So, I'm not going to tell the government what they ought to do, but perhaps there might be an opportunity to appoint magistrates for... What the English do is they appoint recorders. So it's someone who holds a semi-judicial office for a fixed period of time or even on a part-time basis. So you look at some of the public buildings we've got, and it would be handy if there were sessions that started, say, from 4 till 8, a couple of nights a week. You should be able to knock a few things off by then.
Yes, that'll be helpful too. I think everyone's going to have to extend the times they have available to get work done. 1300 222 774 is our number. Let's start off with George in Sunbury. George, good morning. You're on the air. What's the question?
Good morning. Look, I've received an email that's been sent to some of our other neighbours accusing all of us of some malicious damage to our neighbour's car and some of his other property, including trespassing to vandalise the property.
All of you vandalised his car, did you, according to this letter?
Well, according to this email, he names 4 people who vandalised the car, 4 people to have trespassed to do some other property damage. Mm-hmm. Now, this neighbour's been sending abusive emails over the last few years, and his behaviour is increasingly threatening and belligerent. I've been threatened with being run over and subjected to abuse. So what I'd really like to know is, as the email names me as one of the perpetrators and has been circulated, do I have any civil remedies, like in a libel action? And if I have a judgment...
You do have the ability to, well, on one level, if you are concerned for your safety, you have the ability to apply for a personal safety intervention order.
I have done that already, David, thank you.
And have you got it? Have you been successful in obtaining it?
No, it just went in on yesterday.
So you started the process. The answer would be yes, you have an action for damages against him under the Defamation Act. Hard to assess that they would be significant. Unless the distribution list, he named 4 people. How many people got the email?
About 10.
Yeah, you'd have an action there. There's a process under the Defamation Act that basically requires you to send him an invitation to withdraw the accusation. But my problem is that defamation actions require very deep pockets. Mm. So I would simply be running with the application that you've got running for the personal safety intervention order.
Okay, so...
yes, you could proceed, but unless you've got deep pockets and he can afford the costs, I wouldn't be doing it.
George, what do your neighbours say? Are you joining together to do something as a group? I'm assuming that none of you vandalised the car.
No, we haven't vandalised the car, and we haven't gone trespassed and vandalised his other property.
Okay.
I worried about the mental state of this person.
That's a fair question. So, are you working as a group?
No, we're not yet, but we may get together. One or the other.
It would be possible for all of you to seek the same defamation advice. But my problem is that all of this assumes that people are entirely rational.
Yes.
And the system doesn't work very well when a rational person wants to have an argument with an irrational person.
Right. Okay. Now, if we did apply for under the Defamation Act, is it usual for costs to be awarded against the defendant or against the loser?
The unsuccessful party is usually entitled to damages, and for costs. But the difficulty that you will face is that they won't be what we call indemnity costs. They won't be complete recompense for everything that you paid, and you would still expect to be thousands of dollars out of pocket.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, George, we'll leave you with that, and you can make your decisions around what you're prepared to spend if it comes to that. But good luck. It sounds like a very unpleasant situation. Lou in Queenscliff, what's going on?
Good morning. I'm co-executor of my father's will. Probate has been granted and there's been interim distributions. We've written to the solicitors and said, thank you very much for the work that you've done. We'll finish things off ourselves.
Yep.
They've asked us to sign a deed of release, which includes a clause that it seems to me to reduce any capacity we have to go back to them and say, whoops, you did this wrong. I've got no reason, I'm not expecting that, but the clause says we release and forever discharge ex-lawyers from all actions, proceedings, accounts, claims and demands whatever in relation to our interest in the estate of the deceased and our administration.
Just no. We had a call on the same topic either last week or the week before, where that was a case where they wanted to make distributions inside 6 months. I think the lawyer is conflicted between his worry about what he or she might have done and his obligations to you as the client.
Indeed.
I would be simply coming along. When somebody asks me for a release, I ask them to tell me what they've done wrong, that they want the release for. And if the answer is nothing, then why do you want a release? And I would have thought that the obligation between... If you're proposing to do something that the lawyer thinks is wrong, then the lawyer might ask you to acknowledge the advice that's been given. But I think to refuse to hand over the estate assets and file unless he gets a release is wrong.
So that's not standard,
no.
David. That's not standard.
No, I think it's wrong. I mean, if I don't think it's appropriate for a lawyer to come along and say, I want a release. I think it's appropriate for a lawyer to say, I have given you certain advice and you've chosen to do something different. That's fine.
So that should be the end of it. Simply Lou saying, we're not using you anymore. We'll pay your last bill. That's the end of it. Yes.
So Lou, you'll need to open a bank account in the name of the estate. To do that, you'll need to get a tax file number. So have you done that already?
Yep. All done. So
then the answer would be, I want the file. And if you don't get the file, then I'd be complaining to the Legal Services Board.
All right. There is a sum of money still.
To an end. Yep.
There is still some money held in their trust account on our behalf. Are they entitled to retain that money in if we don't sign this deed of release?
They're only entitled to retain money that is either due to them in respect of work they've done or they're not billed, but there is no basis for retaining any costs if there are no any money, and if all financial matters are resolved and there's no work to be done.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
But play hardball.
Yeah, and Lou, let us know how you go on. That'll be interesting. I think others might benefit from your experience. So let us know what happens if the lawyers arc up, because I know David will want to hear about that as well. I'm getting a number of requests for you, David, this morning via text. I'm sorry, we can't answer your questions via text. I know you might not feel comfortable calling in, and I understand that, and that's fine, but I can't put your problems and your challenges to David via text. So the number, if you'd like to call or get someone to call on your behalf, is 1300 222 774. Another Lou in Box Hill South. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. That was very confusing listening to the last one. Every time you said Lou, I thought you were talking to me.
Sorry.
Anyhow, I'm ringing on behalf of my mum. She is a pensioner and has been for a good 20-odd years. She recently, 5 years ago, had to move in with us because she got early onset dementia. And she was a bit too young and still a little bit too independent to actually move into a nursing home. So she's been living with us for a while. We went overseas for a year with her. She had to come with us as a result. And unfortunately, we weren't told by Centrelink that if you were out of the country for over a year, and we were out of the country for 1 year and 3 days, she would have to, her house would be recoded, not as her primary place of residence, and it would be deemed some other, like another asset. And so as a result, she had to pay $21,000 back to them in, I guess, revenue that they suppose she would have
Centrelink benefits
made.
that were paid. Yep.
Well, not just the benefits, but also just the value of the house. They said, I got all of the documentation from Freedom of Information. It's due to the coding of the house primarily. But then now recently, I've also now got nearly a $7,000 bill from the State Revenue Office. So that will be nearly $30,000 that a pensioner who has dementia and is forced to live out of home and is living with us now has to pay back. And I feel like that's not really right, and I'm really not sure what to do.
I would start this at a different point, Lou. The general expectation is that we are each responsible for our own living costs and expenses, and that pensions are paid on the basis of need. And what you have done, which every family that I know does and is perfectly rational, is you come along, because we all have this desire to leave things to our children. And the principal residence is let's look at it from the State Revenue Office's point of view. They've come along and said, in order to be eligible for a principal place of residence exemption from land tax, you need to live there. Now, if your mum has been with you for a number of years, then it's not her principal place of residence. It might be the only property she owns, but she doesn't reside there. So the State Revenue Office have now come to you and said, we're now aware of circumstances which cause us to believe that your property is no longer your principal place of residence. Here is an assessment for land tax for a number of years. Now, I'm recently involved in a similar matter where there was a breakup of the marriage, but the parties had moved to Singapore, and marriage has come to an end, and now someone's got a very large bill from the State Revenue Office because they went to Singapore without saying the property is now a rental property and not our principal residence.
So what they've done is correct then, David?
Yeah, yes, it matches the law. You can enter into an instalment arrangement. What I would suggest, is your mum going to live with you permanently, Lou?
No, well, I guess because she's been a pensioner, she doesn't even get the pension now. They've stopped that entirely. And
that's so because she now owns a property, and which the government now considers to be an investment property, and her assets are such that she doesn't get it.
Yeah, and I get that bit. The issue I guess I have is that she's not living with us through choice. It's her circumstances. She has early onset dementia. She's only 78. And it's now forcing us to put her into a nursing home. And I believe that that's unfair. I mean, the State Revenue Department, they also have a clause about people who have lost the ability to live independently. And I don't understand why my mum doesn't fit that category. She cannot live by herself. She would be a danger to herself to live by herself.
Does that change things, David?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'll take it on notice for next week, Lou. Can I then suggest that you look at... I want you to Google something called the Granny Flat Agreement, and because that would allow the transfer of some assets, and it may impact upon your mum's ability to get a pension entitlement if she's going to live with you for a period of time. So have a look and see if it works. And Virginia, what it is, it's where you do an inter-family transfer of property in return for securing accommodation for somebody.
Okay, all right, and that might then change it.
It might change her pension entitlement, and it might also change her, and it will if you follow through with the granny flat agreement, it would mean that the property would no longer belong to your mum, but it might, at the end of the day, Lou, belong to you or to other family members.
But so that won't change the outstanding bill. That would be into the future.
No, it won't.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it won't. And you can ask for. You can go to Centrelink and ask for an exercise of discretion. But there's no guarantee you'll get what you've asked for.
So give it a try with an exercise of discretion and stay listening next week because David might have a bit more information for you, Lou. Thanks for calling in. Jason in Malvern East, what's the issue? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm actually after what is the definition of a mobile phone, specifically when driving. So my son is a P-plater. He can't use a mobile phone. I have no issue with that. The navigation system in my car, though, has CarPlay. So normally you connect the phone in, shows you the navigation away you go. So what I want to know is if he takes a SIM card out of an old phone and then uses Google to navigate, is that actually okay or is it a breach of the Road Safety Act? I can't find any definition of what a mobile phone is.
Have you looked in the road rules?
I've tried, and it just talks about mobile phone, but there's no definition of, well, you know, is a mobile phone without a SIM still a mobile? I would come along and say, I understand it's the SIM in the car, but the question will, if I was the police officer, my question is, can you make or receive calls on the device? No.
Well, it's not a question of whether you do, it's whether you can. And if you can, I would be of the view that if you're capable of making or receiving calls on that device, then it would meet the definition of a mobile phone. If you can't make or receive calls, it's not a phone, not mobile or otherwise. It doesn't meet the definition of a phone.
Yes. Okay.
You've been pinged, have you, Jason?
No. It's just that he's obviously new. He's trying to navigate, and you know, when I was doing it, I had a map, which is we don't use that anymore. So he has to look at his phone, put it away, try to remember where he got to go, drives for a couple of kilometres, stops, pulls over, turns the engine off, gets his phone out again, gets the next bit. And it'd be a lot easier if you could just have a phone telling him, you know, turn left in 300 metres, turn right in 400 metres.
Your difficulty is going to be if it's clearly a navigation device, I don't see the issue. But if it's a mobile phone that you're using solely as a navigation device, you're using a mobile phone.
Well, it goes to distractibility as well, doesn't it, David? It's about being distracted in the car, and that could be any device, not necessarily a phone.
Well, there's even a suggestion that you get distracted by hands-free phones.
That's right. Yep. All right. It sounds like maybe a more modern device is needed here, Jason.
Expensive solution. Yes.
Well, the other option is, Jason, you could buy him a new car with a sat-nav in it.
Exactly. How about that?
Indeed. Thank you.
So I'm heading towards, you know, nice little Apple Play device there on the dashboard. Very expensive indeed. Joe in Frankston. Good morning. How can we help?
Oh, good morning. Hi. I've got a question about getting a power of attorney. My wife and I have our son is 34. He has an intellectual disability and he's autistic. What we want to do, we set up bank accounts for him ages ago when he was 14 and 15, but now we want to change the bank. But of course, the bank wants to know, because he's now an adult, he's 34. We need to, for his pension and for his NDIS transport and transport costs which he gets. Wife and I want to know how, we're a bit confused about how we get a power of attorney for our son.
Does your son have decision-making capacity, Joe?
Not really. He'll agree with anything I ask him.
Okay. Well, we all want children with that level of decision-making capacity.
It's good he agrees with me. But he will agree with anyone. You know, if you ask him to give him $50, if he had $50, he'd give it to you.
Good, then he doesn't have decision-making capacity. What you do is you apply to VCAT to be appointed as his guardians and administrators, and you would get a supporting report. If you look at the VCAT website, there's a particular form of medical report that you get from his treating doctor. That gets submitted together with your application, and it is all but inevitable that VCAT would agree to appoint you and your wife as his joint guardians and administrators. Because we're just formalising what you currently do.
Yeah, we have to make a decision for him. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Right,
I appreciate
I'm
it.
glad
Thank
that's...
you.
sorry, Joe, I'm glad that's helpful. Thanks so much. It's Mick in Kew who I'm thinking of. What's been going on, Mick? Good morning.
Oh, Mick, yeah, good day. Well, look, what's happened here is a motor vehicle, the BMW was stolen from Kew, my car. It was picked up at 3:30 in the morning on a forklift truck. And then it appeared was next seen on Toorak Road and went through a red light camera. I went through 2 red light cameras subsequently when it was stolen. But what transpired was I've subsequently received 3 summons from the Department of Correction or whatever for a fine of totalling, I think, $333 for each transgression.
Yes.
And when I got back to them, it appears that the red light camera, which in other states or some other states directly go to the police, have been privatised, but the police don't have access to that information. And therefore this car was driven around for about 3 or 4 weeks. Eventually it was found it had been stripped. And what I'm saying is that there seems to be a situation where the activation of this law by the government is leading to this sort of outcome of stolen cars appearing to have no interest in it. And I just sort of bring it up as a legal matter because I think it's a serious one, which is increasing with crime.
David?
So your expectation is that they would check the register of stolen vehicles before processing a traffic camera offence?
There is that, and there's also that in other states the red camera the report goes direct to the nearest police car. So a police car will be alerted, and that's not happening in Victoria.
No, what
matter.
happens is there's a private contractor that installs the phones, installs the cameras, manages the cameras, and processes the pictures.
That's right, but the police are not in this loop.
No, they're not in the loop until the matter's going to court.
So what should Mick do, David?
Well, you can deal with the traffic camera offences by giving them a copy of the police report, which should result in the fines being withdrawn.
Yeah, well, the fine's withdrawn, but what I'm saying is this car could have been easily picked up and then the crime could have been prevented.
So you don't have a question for David, just a complaint?
Well, I do have a question. I just have a question whether he believes that the law should be changed.
Oh,
so
okay.
Situation.
We don't put David in the position of law reform because we just don't want to unleash him in that way, David. Where would it end? God knows what you'd suggest.
Oh, 2 hours a day, that was where it would end, and then none of us could cope with that.
There's been a very, I think, effective suggestion made on text for our caller who had the problem with the sat-nav phone. David in Hyatt says he should buy a new phone with a car attached. And I think that would probably solve the problem, wouldn't it, David?
Oh, I think you're right, yes.
Yes, a nice new shiny one. David, always great to have your assistance. Thanks so much. See you next week.
Thanks, Virginia.
David Whiting there, and who'll be answering your calls next week too.